Hi everyone, and welcome to From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and today I'm going to do a solo episode, and this is going to be the opening episode for Season 3. First of all, I want to celebrate today is Juneteenth, and it happens to be that this episode goes on Juneteenth Day, and I want to celebrate that. And Season 3, I thought about what do I want to talk about, and what do I want to interview women on which topics, and decided to focus on negotiations, and decided to call this season Negotiate Like a Woman. And why is that? You see, when I was growing up and later on in my career, I felt very uncomfortable with several things. One, speaking about money, asking for money, and anything related to negotiating, like even in going to a store, buying something and trying to negotiate the price or terms. I felt very, very uncomfortable doing so. And obviously in the workplace. I also felt very uncomfortable with any kind of conflicts and difficult conversations and tried to avoid them at any cost because I wanted to be seen as cooperative, as pleasant, as nice. And I was afraid that if I get into a conflict or negotiation for that matter, then the tones are going to be high, I'm going to be maybe aggressive, maybe unpleasant. I thought it was only me, but the more I coach women, the more I found that actually that's not only me. Many women face those challenges with being assertive, with speaking up for themselves, with negotiating, setting boundaries, influencing. They are afraid to be perceived as aggressive rather than assertive. And also, my life experiences taught me that negotiation actually doesn't have to be very, I would say, forceful. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be as I kind of imagine it, like two people fighting, raising their voices and angry at each other. It can actually be very pleasant. And I truly believe that negotiations should be pleasant and, as much as possible, try to bring win-win to both parties. And I want to share two stories with you about how negotiation met me at my life. The first story is about moving to the US. We didn't plan that, but my husband was offered to relocate to the US in 2010. Back then, I was pregnant with my third and fourth children. So actually, I have twins. And I was expecting to be a mother of four, from 2 kids to 4. And I was obviously quite concerned, to say the least. I mean, I was hysteric, to be honest. I was worried, how am I going to handle twins? And on top of that, I have 2 kids at home and work and everything. And also I met several people around me with twins that shared with me horror stories about how difficult it is to raise twins. Obviously, I was very anxious. And my husband was offered to move to Denver, Colorado to manage a group there. And it was a great opportunity for his career. At first, when I was still pregnant, I told him, no way. I'm not moving because, again, I was very, very, very concerned and terrified about how am I going to face delivering twins and raising twins. Interesting thing happened that after I delivered and I was in maternity leave at home, my husband, manager, was quite persistent. He really wanted him to go. And he said, well, what about the relocation? I tried to find someone. I didn't find anyone that is suitable, and I think you can really be a great fit there. Why don't you ask your wife again? Maybe she will be willing to do so. And my husband, I will never forget that day. I was sitting at home. Obviously, I was on maternity leave. My husband entered home after his day of work, and he is afraid. I see that he's afraid to speak with me. He wants to tell me something, but he feels very anxious and say, you don't have to accept. I just want to ask. I said, what do you want to ask? Ask. Why are you so, what are you so afraid of? And I said, we don't have to do that. We don't have to agree, but my boss asked me if I'm willing to go to Denver. It's the last chance, blah, blah, blah. And to his surprise, I say, hell yes, why not? Let's do it. Let's go there. And since I said yes, I was like, my whole focus was there, and I found schools and everything, like just started calling people like crazy, and I didn't know anyone there, to be honest. And they started, to do research and all that. But how it's related to negotiations, you may ask. So before we moved, so we were supposed to move in December 2010, his company gave us something called pre-visit. So basically, we were supposed to go there and, do some errands, right? Open a bank account, find a house, and all those things. But we couldn't go, the two of us, because obviously we had babies at home, and no one was willing to stay with 4 children that they are twins, 3-month-old twins. So my husband said, you know what? I want you to go because I trust you to find a house for us. And that was my main objective. Find us a place to live. Basically rent a house. So I said, yeah, why not? I'll do that. And I was happily going to Denver by myself, finally getting some sleep. And it was in November, so a month before we moved. Obviously not the ideal time to rent because it's, getting cold and it's close to winter. It's not like the season for renting. So there are not many rentals. And I had a very particular list of requirements for a house. It has to be at a certain price. It has to be in a certain neighborhood. It has to be, with AC. It has to be with several bedrooms and so forth. So I had a list. And for the life of me, I couldn't find a place that met our qualifications, either like the price or the requirements. And a lot of older houses with no AC and we were very particular about AC. Here in Israel, it's very, very hot. And to be honest, also in Denver, it gets hot in the summer. And people try to convince me you don't need AC in Denver. Well, you do need AC. It's not very humid, but it gets really hot. Anyway, so towards the end of my visit there, I'm like pulling my hair. I don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to find us a house. And I visited someone, like a network. That week, I kind of went to meet different people, starting to get to know people who live there. And I remember I went to visit someone who lives there. And I told him about my challenge. Listen, I cannot find a house. What should I do? And he just sat there and say, let's take a look. He opens Craigslist and does a search. I told him exactly what I wanted and all that. And he said, I found you a house. And I said, how can that be? I've been on Craigslist for weeks and I did all the phone calls and all that. I didn't find anything. And I said, well, here it is. And it was a beautiful house, quite new. Met all the qualifications, everything except for one. You guessed it right, the price. It wasn't on our price point. It was actually much higher. I think it was like 25% over the top limit of what I was willing to pay. And I told him, but that's not on our budget. What do you mean you find a house? I cannot afford that. And he said, what do you have to lose? Just call them and go and see this house. Maybe they'll be willing to compromise. I said, you're crazy. That's a huge difference. And that was the story in my head. There's no way. But I was so desperate and he was so convincing. And I said, okay, I'm going to do that. So I called the homeowner and I also called the local realtor that I met earlier. And I said, hey, are you willing to come with me just as because I don't live here, I don't have a credit history. Like, I think it would be better if I come with someone local, not just by myself. And she said, yeah, absolutely. And I went there and walking through the house, and it looked like a mansion to me. It was so beautiful. And I tell the landlord, your house is incredible. It's surpassing any expectations I had on finding a house. I mean, I love it. I would love to rent it. And they were super excited. Say, yeah, great, because they were quite desperate. Like, they tried to rent it and they couldn't rent it. And, it was winter, getting to be winter and so forth. I said, but you know what? I have one thing that is challenging for me. Your price point is way above my budget, and this is my budget. I cannot afford, paying more. I am willing to rent it, we can work on the terms and all that, and I'm willing to move in and all that, because he was really anxious about renting it as soon as possible. And he said, to my surprise, he said, let me speak with my wife. He actually didn't throw. I thought he will just tell me, okay, no, bye. But actually, he was willing to consider that. And eventually, on a Friday, like the night before I was supposed to go back home, he called and he said, well, we have a proposal for you. We are willing to accept your price for the first 6 months. And after 6 months, we'll increase it by 10%. And this was a fantastic deal, way below market value. Even with the increase after 6 months, that was still way below market value. And I was like planning to find a job at that. So I couldn't believe I was able to rent this house. And, the thing is that not just that I couldn't believe I was able to get it, but the process was so pleasant. It was like a friendly conversation. I was complimenting him on his house. I was very, very transparent, very real. Wasn't trying to fake it, like to look for flaws. I was excited about the house. I told him how much I wanted to rent it and all that. And we had a very nice conversation. And when I talked about the money, I was, again, very, very real. I told him everything was true. I mean, I wasn't lying. I was very truthful, very honest, very transparent. And eventually we were able to make it work. And then I realized something. I realized that first, hey, hell yeah, I can negotiate. And yes, maybe I was lucky. Maybe that, he was desperate. I'm not saying I would be able to do that every single time, but I was able to do something I haven't thought I will be able to. It was nice. It was pleasant. It was me. I negotiated like myself, like I would like to negotiate. And it worked. So when I say negotiate like a woman, what I mean is negotiate like you, like yourself. If I believe that communication should be pleasant, if I believe that we should find win-win situations, if I believe that we should always try to find ways to collaborate pleasantly, then there is no reason why I wouldn't be able to negotiate like myself in a pleasant way, true to my values, humility, transparency, collaboration. There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do that. In fact, when I am negotiating as myself, true to my values, the other person can identify that I'm real, that I'm not trying to fool the other side, that I'm not trying to kind of do something unpleasant or that I'm not untruthful. Or you see what I mean? Like, they can tell that I'm genuine, that I'm real. So that's why I think that women, we should negotiate like women. We should embrace ourselves and all the values that we bring and we should negotiate as ourselves and not try to be something or someone we are not. The other story I have for you is from work, actually. I had to negotiate with a vendor. And the thing is, the vendor, we had to qualify the vendor. It was a software that we needed to use. We had to qualify it first. But the problem was that the vendor was much, much more expensive than a previous vendor we used. The problem with the previous vendors that they didn't want to continue with us and the terms was not working, so we had to find an alternative solution. So we were kind of in a situation that I had to find an alternative vendor. And I went to the conversation with the new vendor, and I was thinking well, I mean, I'm kind of forced to find a new vendor, and they're much more expensive. What am I going to do? How am I going to be able to get a better deal? So I went there, and I was very pleasant. I went to the conversation very, very pleasantly. We had actually multiple conversations. It was relatively like a multi-meeting negotiation. It wasn't like one meeting. And we built kind of rapport. We started by building rapport. I was telling him, like this salesperson, I was telling him about me, about my family. He was sharing some stuff. So we built a little bit relationship. It wasn't just like, let's get to the, all kind of business discussions. It was a little bit more human. Like we actually talked like human beings, like friends, I would say. So we built kind of a rapport. And I shared that I really liked his product. Like similar to the house thing, I was very transparent about what I liked. I said, you have a wonderful product. We want to use it. It really fits our needs. It's wonderful. And I said, you know what? There is one challenge. The challenge is the price. It's much higher than other vendors. And the other vendors, we prefer not to work with them. We want to work with you, because we were checking other alternatives as well. It wasn't the only vendor I was checking. So, and it was true. To be honest, it was absolutely true. I checked other vendors. I spoke with few others. They're not as good. And I told them, listen, I mean, there are other alternatives you probably know, but they're not as good. They're not as good as you. And we really want to work with you. So how can we find a way to work together? So, eventually it was kind of, we discussed different things, but I was able to really get the most out of this negotiation. Like I was able to get the best deal I could. I was flexible. I was willing to get some commitments, larger volume and so forth. There are several things I was trying to figure out how I can come forward towards him and he was trying to come forward towards me. So it was we were truly trying to find win-win for both companies. And eventually, again, the price was higher, but I got a much, much better deal. And then the original kind of offer, both reducing the price point a little bit, and then they gave us a lot of extras. And we increased the volume. And it was pleasant. It was like a friendly conversation. So that's another story that kind of, I was really me. I was me. I was not trying to be someone I'm not. And I entered those meetings. The thing is, I entered those meetings not with anticipation of a fight or an unpleasant interaction. I really entered the conversations as like, hey, we're going to have a friendly chat. We're going to try to learn what each of us need. And we're going to try to find a solution that works for both of us. So like two people trying to find a solution that works for both sides. And I'm going to be just myself, nice, pleasant, smiling, interested about the other person. And we're going to find a way. And it worked. And it was nice. And I actually enjoyed it. And I remember that after we signed the deal, I was like, oh my God, I like it. I actually enjoy it. I could do it. Okay, I'm not a negotiator, and that's not my main, thing. But the thing is that I realized that I'm actually not bad. Probably could be better. Probably can learn a lot. But the thing is that I could be myself. And that's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to talk about in this season. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring incredible women as always. And I'm going to interview them. And we're going to touch on each episode on negotiation, persuasion, and influence based on their experiences. And they're going to share their wisdom with you. So you heard from me what worked for me. And that's my approach. My approach is always win-win and collaboration, and let's try to solve a problem. But I'm happy to share other stories as well. I'm actually excited to hear from those women what worked for them. And let's see how many episodes I'm going to be able to bring to this season. So last 2 seasons, we had 30 episodes each. Let's see what this season brings. So thank you so much for listening today. I'm so looking forward to this season. And I want to ask you to reach out and share with me, what would you like to hear me talking about? What guests do you want me to bring? Which topics do you want me to cover? And if you liked this podcast, please write a review, rate us, and share it with your friends, with whoever you think this podcast can be helpful to. So thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you next week with our first episode. Stay tuned. Bye and have a wonderful Juneteenth.